Hello there, beer enthusiasts and curious minds alike. Welcome to our deep dive into the art and science of beer making. It's an age-old practice, steeped in tradition and innovation, bringing joy to many a heart. And if you're thirsty for knowledge, you're in the right place. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share our video to keep these brew-tiful insights coming. So buckle up and let's journey through the fascinating world of beer brewing. Beer brewing starts with gathering 4 key ingredients: water, malted barley, hops, and yeast. Now let's take a moment to appreciate each one. First off, water. It's the unsung hero of beer making, making up around 95% of the final product. It's more than just a base, it also influences the beer's flavor profile. Next up, malted barley. This is where the magic starts. When we malt barley, it releases sugars that not only add flavor but also provide the fuel for our next ingredient, yeast, to produce alcohol. Speaking of yeast, it's the workhorse of beer brewing. It ferments the sugars from the malted barley, creating alcohol and carbon dioxide. Last but not least, we have hops. These little green cones pack a punch, providing bitterness to balance out the sweetness from the malted barley. With these 4 ingredients, we're ready to start brewing. The first step in brewing is mashing. Now don't let that term scare you off. It's actually quite simple. Mashing is when we take our malted barley and mix it with hot water. This process is akin to making tea, but instead of tea leaves, we have barley. Why do we do this, you might ask? Well, barley is a grain that contains a lot of sugars. These sugars are the key ingredients for fermentation, which we'll get to later. By steeping the barley in hot water, we release these sugars, creating a sweet liquid we call wort. Imagine the wort as a blank canvas, waiting to be painted with flavors. It's the base of our beer, the foundation upon which we build. This is where the magic begins, where the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Now that we have our wort, it's time to add some flavor. And that, my friends, is what we'll dive into next. Next, we bring the wort to a boil and add the hops. Now, this is where the magic really starts to happen. You see, as the wort bubbles away, we begin to introduce our hops. These little green flowers are the soul of your beer, adding a beautiful bitterness that cuts through the sweetness of the malt. And it's not just about bitterness. The hops also infuse the beer with a wide range of aromas, from floral and citrusy to piney and earthy, depending on the variety. This is what gives your beer its character, its personality, if you will. But it's not as simple as just throwing in a handful of hops and hoping for the best. Oh no, timing is everything. Early additions contribute more towards bitterness, while hops added later in the boil lend more aroma to the final product. With the hops added, we now have what's essentially a proto-beer. This brew is now ready for the next step, fermentation. So let's get to it. Now comes the magic part, fermentation. So let's dive right in. With the wort all boiled up and hopped to perfection, it's time to cool it down. It's a crucial step, because yeast, our next ingredient, prefers a cozy, room temperature environment. And speaking of yeast, this tiny organism is the real MVP of brewing. It's what transforms our sweet wort into the bubbly, intoxicating beverage we all know and love. Yeast is introduced into the cooled wort, and it gets to work, feasting on the sugars. It's a natural gourmand, savoring every bit of sugar it can find. But unlike most of us after a hearty meal, yeast doesn't take a nap. Instead, it gets busy, producing 2 key byproducts, alcohol and carbon dioxide. This process, known as fermentation, is where the magic happens. The yeast's feast transforms the wort into beer, imbuing it with its characteristic alcoholic content and bubbly nature. And just like any good magic trick, it takes a bit of time. Over the course of a few weeks, the yeast works its wonders, turning our sweet, hop-infused wort into a full-fledged beer. However, don't pop the tops just yet. After a few weeks of fermentation, you've got beer. But we're not quite finished yet. There's still a final few steps to take before our brew is ready to enjoy. So, hold on to your hats, folks. The best is yet to come. Our beer now needs some time to mature. This is the stage in the beer-making process where patience truly becomes a virtue. After the hustle and bustle of brewing, the beer is transferred to a maturation tank. Here, in this peaceful environment, the beer is allowed to rest and develop its full range of flavors and aromas. Imagine the beer as a young sapling, just starting to sprout. With the right conditions and time, it blossoms into a mighty oak, robust and full of character. This is exactly what happens during maturation. The yeast, which was so active during fermentation, now settles down, creating a clearer beer. At the same time, the complex interplay of malt and hops develops, rounding out the flavor profile and creating that mature, well-balanced taste we all know and love. But maturation isn't just about flavor, it's also about carbonation. During this stage, the beer undergoes a secondary fermentation. This is a slower, gentler process where the remaining yeast and sugars interact to produce carbon dioxide. This natural carbonation gives the beer its delightful fizziness, a crucial aspect of its final personality. Once our beer has matured, it's time for packaging. This is where the beer makes its final journey, from the maturation tank to bottles, cans, or kegs. Each method has its advantages, but they all serve the same purpose: to preserve the beer's quality and flavor until it reaches your glass. Every detail matters, from the type of container to the way it's sealed. After all, we've put so much love and care into this brew, we don't want anything to spoil it. Packaging is an art in itself. It's the final touch, the bow on the gift that is our lovingly crafted beer. It's the promise of a refreshing experience, the anticipation of that first delicious sip. And there you have it, the beer is ready to be enjoyed. From the selection of the finest ingredients to the patient maturation and careful packaging, every step in the process contributes to the unique character of the final product. So next time you raise a glass, remember the journey your beer has been on? Cheers! So that's the journey from grain to glass. We've gathered ingredients, mashed, boiled, hopped, fermented, matured, and packaged. It's a process of art and science, tradition and innovation. Thanks for joining us on this beer brewing adventure. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. Cheers!